Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and it's Thursday. What that means is we are joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey through the world of martial arts and everything in between. My guest today was in the Marine Corp. He's a martial artist and author, a fight choreographer. He's been featured in numerous martial arts magazines, and he's also been involved in two of my all-time favorite martial arts movies, Bloodsport and Only the Strong. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Frank Dukes. How are you doing today, sir?
Very good. Thank you.
What we like to do with every guest, I want to go back to the beginning. I know, obviously, a lot of people have heard of you and know kind of the story from the movie, but I want to know, when you were a kid, what was that first experience with martial arts? What led to you getting involved in martial arts and kind of where that first spark came from?
I think the first start came from just watching different TV shows as a kid. And, like Wild Wild West, Robert Conrad, he would do like some jiu-jitsu and you just see, Mission Impossible, all these different movies that were doing different things. I remember watching a James Cagney film when I was very young called Blood on the Sun. And it was really the first time martial arts was ever portrayed in film. Film was done in black and white in the 1930s. And it was about, us going to war with Japan. He plays a reporter who stumbles across these plans to invade the United States, etc. So it was a very interesting story.
I've actually
at the
never
very
heard
end
of
at the film, he's got a martial arts fight and with throws, and it went on for quite a while. That kind of hooked my interest. I'd go to the library, and the only books that existed in the library at that time was Bruce Tegner's some books by Bruce Tegner on self-defense. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't even a gi. He was in a sweat outfit showing different maneuvers. I remember being picked on, remembering learning one of those techniques, and I actually, when a guy came to push me, I just used the same technique from the book, and it worked. And that set me on my way to learn more.
You're actually my second guest who basically their first experience in using it was learning it from a Bruce Tegner book. That's actually awesome to know how effective that was, learning it from a book. That's really impressive.
Yeah. It was, and they were very basic, the books were very basic in those days, but then so was people's understanding of fighting. It was either boxing or in my day, when I grew up, if you used your legs, you were considered a coward, if you fought somebody and you kicked them.
Okay.
Totally different era.
Definitely.
It wasn't until I was in high school that kind of perception changed with the movie Billy Jack, where he does some pretty amazing kicks. The actual person doing it was Bong Soo-han, someone whose school I would go to and audit his classes and then copy what he was doing as a kid. And I was pretty much self-taught. I just didn't have the money to pay for lessons. My parents are Holocaust survivors. We didn't have family. That survived. Not too many. My father had a sister, and my mother had two sisters, and they were in Israel. 10,000 miles away. So we were pretty much on our own.
Okay. So, and what was your first experience then with actual instruction from somebody, where you were able to learn from someone else other than being self-taught?
It's a good question. I think that would be probably Vic Moore.
Okay.
I saw Vic Moore beat Bruce Lee in a test of speed in Long Beach Internationals. And of course, the way it's portrayed today, it's the other way around. Mm-hmm. But he took me aside, and actually Bruce Lee took aside my friend who was handicapped, severely handicapped. And, Lee gravitated to him because he showed him his leg was shorter than the other. And so that encouraged my friend, and he taught him like a back fist. And then Vic Moore taught me some maneuvers. And it was kind of fascinating to me. And I practiced those things for 3 years and
Wow.
ran into him, at the Long Beach Invitational again. He beat Mike Stone, who was reportedly undefeated, had 90 matches in a row. He went up against Vic. Vic dropped him with a ridge hand strike in a sweep at the same time. And that, which is actually was Mike's move. That was his signature move. Dropped him with his own move. And I mean, it was very quick. The match was very quick.
Okay.
Stone hit the floor very, very violently. And I think he dislocated his shoulder, by the looks of it. Jim Harrison was there and Al put it in. They wanted to fight Vic, but it was over. And then as he was leaving the stadium, basically I ran into him, and he's had this entourage around him called the Black Dragons. And the Black Dragons, basically made it possible for Vic to compete in many places, because a lot of times in those years you had segregation, and Vic, these guys would hold their tournaments in whites only hotels. And so the Black Dragons would kind of escort him into the whites only hotel and force people to fight him so he could get his belts, move up.
Wow. Okay.
And that, of course, led into a number of things. And so anyways, when I met Vic, it was a very short meeting, and I said something like that's prompted him to want to spar with me, and got him to show my 3 moves. And basically from there he found me a teacher.
Okay. And then what teacher did he find you, and was that somewhere?
It was kind of a roundabout way, but I ended up finding a guy named Jack Secchi, who's teaching at the YMCA.
Okay.
And then he later was teaching at the Los Angeles Valley College. I trained with him, but for the most part, I still would walk home from junior high, and I go to Bill Riyosaki's school, and I would stand outside his window and I would learn on the street there. And I want to make it clear, I was sort of like one of those kids who would clean the windows,
Mm-hmm.
if you were in a car, whether you asked for it or not.
Yeah.
And I hope to get a tip.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of what I did with Bill. I basically went to the Chinese restaurant next door, made a deal with them to clean their place. They'd let me have the supplies. I clean his windows occasionally or whatever, and he would lift up the blinds, and he'd let me watch, classes. And inside, there would sometimes be Benny Akitas. I mean, he was like a brown belt then.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching him put on an arm bar. And it's just interesting how I was always on the peripheral of the martial arts scene in Los Angeles, which was the mecca for martial arts. I'd go to Chuck Norris's school and, try to look in and study. And these are the things that helped define me. I just basically started approaching it from a totally different point of view. I eventually met Tanaka,
Mm-hmm.
who taught me the ninja arts, which is really more about deception, how to use feints, how cover and concealment, poisons, all the high concepts in martial arts, weapons. It didn't really do anything with hand-to-hand per se. There was some, but not much. And because that wasn't the mission of close quote a ninja was, which is, I use the term loosely because the term was actually coined at the beginning of the 20th century, along with the term ninjutsu. Yet people are promoting it as like this 4 centuries old terminology and being, and it's a title, and it's not a title. It's a job description, basically, of what a person's doing. Anybody could be a ninja. It's just means spying.
Okay.
In essence, eavesdropping, gathering intelligence. So
about how old were you when you started training with Tanaka then?
I was in my teens, early teens,
Okay.
maybe 13, 14. And it continued till I was about 19. What Tanaka was great about is he taught me basically, most martial arts are spoon-fed their techniques. It has to be done this way, and this is the way you do it. And you teach the next guy to do it exactly that way, and that's the way you do it. Where with him, it was more of a process. It was more like teaching me how to fish as opposed to giving me fish every day.
Okay. So
he taught me how to look at techniques, how to break them down, what to look for. Where's the balance when you're watching someone? What's their foot position? Where are their hands positions? How they're rotating their body? these were the important things he was teaching me. So I could always learn from just watching all the other styles. And he knew what I was up to.
So it was a little more customized more to you specifically. So you'd know what would work best for you then.
Exactly. And I used a lot of Bruce Lee's philosophy. That's why we wear the blue gi. Bruce Lee talks about, adapting, being like water. And, that's what the blue in our uniform stands for, is that principle, be like water, which actually comes from Miyamoto Musashi.
Right.
Well before Bruce Lee, but Bruce Lee popularized it. And of course, I give him credit for it because that's how I learned it. I learned it through him.
Yeah.
I wasn't reading Musashi at that time, but I was seeing some of his books pop up.
Yeah, I didn't realize that's why you had the blue. That's really cool that's a nice way to honor him. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and it actually was even so much my idea. It was my own. The blue gi was actually designed for me by my own students. Came from Francisco Diaz Garcia. Prior to that, I was wearing a white one that was identical with the pads on the shoulders. That was designed by Enrique Flores, and it was to signify that as teachers, we all carry a burden on our shoulders. It's to remind the students that we carry a burden. That weighs heavy on us.
Okay. And then so you said till you were about 19. Is that when you joined the Marine Corps then? Yeah,
when I was 19. Well, actually, it was even before that. When I was 17, and they actually came and recruited me.
Okay.
I took the Ep56 test, and I was basically being taught tradescraft after school. And then at 19, they said I ended up in the Marine Corps Reserves, but I was really, really being geared up to be an agent, a non-attributable agent.
Okay.
They started me at a very young age.
So what are some of the martial arts instructions? What did you think of the martial arts instructions you got in the military? And I've heard a lot of different stories.
Well, I didn't get anything really from the military.
Oh, really?
I got very little from the military. I mean, I got a lot of martial arts in terms of shooting skills.
Okay.
Bomb disposal, making bombs, grenades, poisons. I can go into some, we can talk about some of those things. Mm-hmm. But the majority of the hand-to-hand combat, I devised myself, and it comes from my own proprietary technology that propelled me ahead of everybody.
Okay.
And I came to their attention because I was, who I knew and who I was associated with. They wanted to infiltrate, certain power factions in South America that would come to Kumite events. Here I am in the Black Dragons. My father's grandfathers were talking 3 generations in the intelligence gathering business. So we had contacts that you can't believe. And it was just, I was just a right candidate for that, to become an asset. The reason they put me in the Marine Corps was so I could, have some kind of control over me.
Okay.
And also so I'd have a military bearing, and I meet certain requirements, that the Congress on the military, et cetera. But majority of anything I did, this is why I laugh at these people, trying to make a thing out of my military in regards to my intelligence career is, I'm all private sector. I've said it in my book, The Secret Man. Unfortunately, I had to fight with my publisher, and one of the reasons I got my rights back is I told them not to put on the cover. He was I was the CIA's most valuable asset, I think. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It was. Give me a second here.
Okay.
He was. The book jacket read, he was the CIA's finest covert operative. Well, I never, ever claimed to be in the CIA, a card-carrying agent. One could make an argument that I was an asset, but I wasn't run by them. In fact, if you read my book, it's very specific that I was kept outside of any purview of any intelligence agency because there was major security leaks going on. And, the agencies were compromised, and the intelligence community at the highest levels protected itself is that it had to go outside itself and start something new that hadn't been penetrated. Nobody would have penetrated at that point. Okay. And that's what I was a part of.
And
I had 90 guys in my channel, and there's, I think, 4 of us were left alive in 1996.
Wow. I will definitely put a link to your book and stuff out there because I know I need to reread it. I read it when I was a teenager. I need to reread it. I lent it out to someone and never got it back, so I actually need to get myself another copy. But yeah, I read it. I believe, God, I was probably 14 or 15, so early 90s when I read it. But I know I enjoyed it back then. So
Yeah.
So then what kind of, I know I don't really want to ask this because you've told this story so many times, but I definitely want to talk a little bit about the Kumite, obviously, because that's a big part of your life.
Sure.
Just talking a little bit about it, what the experience was like. I know.
Well, first thing people have to understand, the Kumite it's not comparable to a mixed martial art competition per se.
Right.
With the exception, I would say, the very, very early UFCs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you kind of described it once as more like the 100-man Kumite type thing, where it's not a bracketed tournament. You're
right.
Fighting person after person after person. Yeah. That makes more sense. So
exactly. And if you read the article in Black Belt Magazine, I've been saying that since 1980. It's not a secret. It's no change in my story. But other people, to diminish me because they feel threatened by my accomplishments, have gone out there and created media campaigns defaming me. And one of which their arguments is this so-called Kumite math problem that it would take thousands of people for me to win 60 matches at a tournament.
Right.
When all you need is 30 guys, or 30 guys, and each one stepping to the left,
Yep.
Do it twice. I mean, and then make it a double elimination or triple elimination that way. You don't need that many people once you understand what really Kumite is about. It's really just about fighting a fresh guy every minute, and it's exhausting. It's a test of endurance. It's held over 3 days for the simple reason that the first day you take some serious hits, but it's the second day when you start to feel them. And by the time you hit the third day and you're still competing, then that's when you really know what you're made of. And it's all about being a test. It's really testing yourself. And you see this in a lot of great boxers who've never been tested. And then one day they get tested, and all of a sudden it spells the end of their career. Good example is Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, pound for pound, he bulldozed through everybody.
Yep.
I mean, there's nobody could stand up to the guy until he finally, I forgot who he fought that did that, and then all of a sudden you saw a different side of Mike. You saw something come out. And to be fair to Mike Tyson, he had lost his trainer.
Yeah.
So I could see that happening where he reverted back to maybe how he was as a kid, feeling that emptiness. He needed guidance. He wasn't getting it.
Yeah, Gus was such a huge part of his life.
I understand why things turned down for the guy.
Right.
I think he's one of the greatest fighters ever lived.
Oh, I agree completely. Yes.
And people can say what they want about him, but they've never stepped in a ring. They've never been hit.
Oh yeah.
They say, like with me, most of my critics it's really interesting. Most of my critics, if you really look into them, they're substance abusers. They have very little going on for themselves in their home life and in life. And a lot of them suffer from mental illness. That's just the reality. Okay. And most of my fans, they're police officers, I'd say the law enforcement and military community. But they tried to distance me with the military community when all these fraudulent claims of my committing stolen valor were being bolstered all over the internet.
Right.
And no one's ever found me talking about saying I was a Medal of Honor winner, that outside of maybe Sheldon Lettich, who did it for his own personal gain, who was caught and exposed in my trial of Van Dam that he was stealing my intellectual property and basically making it his own. He was taking credit for my intellectual property contributions. He was doing whatever he could to slander my name and drive a wedge between me and Van Dam because Van Dam was his meal ticket. It's that simple. He was really worried about that. And so I found myself, with this guy saying, what was it? Lettich is on there saying that everyone took my word for it. That there was no due diligence done. Well, Sheldon is, first of all, one of 3 writers. Second of all, due diligence is performed by him, although he was contractually obligated to perform his due diligence. So I guess he breached his contract is what he's saying, and he was incompetent in what he's doing. But it's the legal team for Canon Films that performs due diligence. They're the ones I had to convince and what things were, and they based on their own investigation at the end of the movie, they put up all the screen credits.
Right.
And they don't take that lightly. I mean, you can shut down a whole movie for false advertising just based on that. They weren't about to do that or lose their investment. Nobody was taking my word for it. I mean, these people make films all the time. Same thing with HarperCollins. When I was doing my book with HarperCollins, I had to sit there for a week with the office of Slade and Metcalf. And whatever I couldn't prove up true in the book, it got cut. My book was, originally over 450 pages. It got dwindled down to like 312.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that should have remained, it eventually took my voice out of the book. People will say, oh, there's certain details. Like if you read the disclaimer from the book, it says certain places were changed, places were changed. So it might be speaking about me being doing something in Iraq when I could be somewhere else, a different part of the world, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And so that's kind of what went on there.
So I'm curious, what made you, in your martial arts career, what made you want to start teaching? That's something that's obviously become a big part of your life over the years. When did you first start teaching, and what made you want to do it?
Well, teaching was a natural process. I mean, it came out of, first of all, it really came out of a need. I wasn't intending to be a teacher. Okay. What had happened is I was getting ready to go to medical school, actually.
Okay.
I was planning on being a podiatrist. And I'd taken, I was saved my money for that. I was getting ready to do it. And there was a Friday night, I'll never forget it. I got a call. My father had a major heart attack. He was a breadwinner for the family, and I had to step up and take care of the family. And then Saturday, my girlfriend, or who I would later become my wife, she when she realized I wasn't going to go to med school, her mother informs me that I can't be seeing her daughter anymore because her daughter's an investment.
Oh, wow.
And then come Sunday, I was teaching just to make extra money at a place called Kung Fu Sansu on Lancashire Boulevard with this guy named Chuck Corey. And Chuck decided he was going to try to grab all my students because I had built up quite a following, because I would teach on the weekends when he wasn't interested in teaching. And he doesn't give me even 24-hour notice. He just says, I'm not renting to you, find a new place. And it's like, what? Why? What's going on? And then, of course, when my students showed up, he's trying to pitch them to go into his classes and how I'm not going to be there anymore. And I just turned around and I said, heck, what am I going to do here? And I've noticed within walking distance of my parents' home was this laundromat, and behind the laundromat were these buildings tucked away in the corner, a little abandoned ice cream shop. It said Happy Days Ice Cream. And of course it was for lease. Probably one of the worst locations you could ever imagine, because it's hard to see from the street. But I got the number down and I contacted the landlord. He saw I was a young guy. I had no business credit or anything. Made me take a ride with him. Got to know me really nice. His name was Mr. Monteleone, old-fashioned Italian guy. He said, I believe in you, kid. I'm going to give you a shot. And he let me rent the premises. And I had no mats. I had nothing. I mean, it was it was an abandoned ice cream store.
Wow.
All I had is a wall. Brought my little metal desks from home, put that in. That was my desk. Bought a bunch of carpet, installed it, and then I even made my own mats. I had gone down to the fashion mart or the clothing mart and found rolls of vinyl, and I got carpet padding and sewed it together, and I made my own big mat. And that's how I started. And God provides, because all I had is a little sign, little blackboard sign. It was 2 by 2 feet. That's how big it was, just 2 by 2 feet. Hung it up in the window, and it said Duke's Ninjutsu. And I didn't have a ladder to turn the Happy Days ice cream sign around. But word got out that I was training, and I had 43 students in the first week sign up.
Very cool. Okay. So then, thinking back to that first school, and then and when you were teaching on weekends to now, what do you think's changed mostly about your teaching style over the years? Well,
I've developed, I went from being a Kumite fighter and pressure testing all the techniques to working, in different arenas, having to adapt. And as more information made itself known to me, I just studied. I'm constantly learning new things, perfecting new things. That's what makes Duke's Ruse so interesting because if you talk to one of my black belts who's been, let's say, trained with me 20 years ago, he walks in today and he goes, I can see the old stuff, but it's new. Somehow it's new. It's just room way ahead of what it used to be. And that's because we're constantly evolving. We're evolving with the times. And that way we as a system will never be obsolete. Many martial arts systems are obsolete because they don't evolve with the times, or they're more of a form of exercise and physical recreation than they are for the purposes they were originally intended.
Okay. So if someone asked you then if you had to describe what makes your style different than others, to someone who maybe isn't familiar with a lot of styles of martial arts, what would make yours different?
My style is based on the laws of combat. I actually sat down and identified them. My style is a martial science. We can keep reproducing the same result over and over again. There's many different ways to explain it, but it's based on certain principles and laws. And we approach it from almost a scientific point of view.
Okay.
Where other system, it's more of an artsy point of view. It's sort of like a difference, the argument between an artisan and a craftsman. As a craftsman, I know what materials I need. I know what I need to do, and I know that I can make that chair the same every time. An artist, he grabs some materials, and he doesn't know at the end of the day whether it's going to be a chair, a table, or what as he works on it. And that's what it's like in fighting. I know if I use this repertoire of techniques, I'm going to produce this outcome. A lot of guys go out there in their fighting situation and they just kind of wing it.
Okay.
And that's a big difference. And ours aren't set techniques. I want to make that clear. That's another thing. A lot of systems have set techniques, but those techniques will not work. You see that happen in the UFC because there's too many variables to make them not work. So when you approach things from a science point of view and you keep following the science, and you follow it from that standpoint, you get the same reproducible results, or you can predict, what your opponent's going to do before they do it, and be there to defeat them.
And do you just the one school, or do you have actually branch schools? Have any of your former students branched out and have a school underneath you?
Well, the only formal schools right now are formal schools of Duke's Rue are in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Okay. One of the reasons is, it becomes very hard to pressure test here in the United States without getting sued.
Right.
And so they're mainly there. I do have instructors who are teaching Duke's Rue. They also teach other systems as well. And it's, they're certainly helpful, but it's not Duke's Rue, not purely Duke's Rue. That's what I need you to understand.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what led to Hollywood? I know I've heard about like the Black Belt article or whatever, but is that what led you to Hollywood? And just kind of a little bit about that and, how you ended up getting involved in Hollywood. And also, after helping with like Bloodsport and stuff, what made you want to step in front of the camera? Because you've actually been in front of the camera and it's not like Only the Strong I mentioned and stuff like that. What made you want to take that shift also?
Well, first of all, I never wanted to be in front of the camera.
Okay.
And Only the Strong, the reason I was before the camera is because we're going to do a fight scene with a hot welding torch. And I was going to trust anybody to wield that with Mark Dacascos being around.
Right.
It has to be done in a certain way so the actor doesn't get hurt, And also I had to throw it in a certain way so that the people around me didn't get hurt, because I have a car crash down on me in that movie.
Right.
And it was a dangerous stunt. They didn't really prepare for it. And, I was going to have somebody else do something I couldn't do myself. So I did it.
Nice.
Never wanted to be an actor. Never had a headshot, contrary to some of what my haters have put out there. Again, like Sheldon Lettich saying, I wanted to be an actor in his movie Firefight. It was the last thing I wanted to do. He kind of cajoled me into being in this small short that he and I produced. It was to help Sheldon become a director because he needed a reel. So I helped him organize a reel back in the day.
Okay.
And for those who don't know it, Sheldon Lettich is he used to be my former writing partner. He basically negotiated away from me the credits for Bloodsport. I was the first one to take it to a concrete form and a treatment. The contracts reflect that. It says that he acknowledges that they purchased the story from me, that it's not his story, and that he's a work for hire. And it's kind of a complicated situation.
Right.
I don't want to make it convoluted, but basically what happened is he tends to put out this untruth and says that he came up with the story by riding around with me in his truck, and I told him this story about a secret event. The way he paints it is not the way that I told him about it at all. Again, we were writing partners. I told him about a script I already had, property we could maybe rework. Anyways, he had done the short Firefight, and I turned around and looking at it today, I should have never done business with Sheldon, because he showed us real colors when we were doing that film. I mean, he didn't have the context. I had all the context. I brought him the producers through me, the camera people, the stunt people, casting for the short, which he did with a guy named Jacob Bressler, who's produced maybe 80 films. I mean, in Hollywood. Jacob was just starting out at that time, and he wanted a producer's credit. Sheldon promised him a producer's credit. And Jacob Bressler said he would defer his payment. And in the end, Sheldon comes back and says, well, I'm not going to let you be the producer. It's like, what do you mean you're not going to give me producing credit? I'm doing all this work. I've done it already. He says, well, I'm not going to let you do it. He says, well, then you need to pay me for my work. I'm deferring it for the credit. I'm not going to, I want to get paid for my work, then my casting services and everything else. And Sheldon refused to pay him. And I had to stop, Jacob. And Jacob's the top Kapap martial arts instructor in the United States today. Okay. One of the top Krav Maga people in the United States today. He was also one of my first black belts. And he was going to take a baseball bat to him. I'm not kidding. He was going to light him up. That's not what they do in the Middle East. That's where he was from. He was straight from Israel. You don't do that. Play those games with people's wages or what they've done. Use people like that.
Right.
And I ended up going in my own pocket and paying Jacob for something I really didn't need to pay him for. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
He should have gotten his credit. I was very angry when I saw that with Sheldon. It's like, why'd you do that, man? And he didn't have offer any explanations for it until later. It's because he was, again, credits help bring new business to you. And when we were doing Bloodsport, I mean, what happened with this film is basically he's editing Firefight. It's during Firefight he meets Mark DeSalle. Mark DeSalle explains to him he wants to do a movie on kickboxing, which he eventually does. It's called Kickboxer. Okay. And Sheldon, being a writing partner of me, knows nothing about martial arts, but he says, hey, I've got my writing partner. He's a martial artist. And so let us write this kickboxing movie for you. And he says, sure, let's go meet him. And so Sheldon arranges it, and Mark DeSalle comes into my studio with Sheldon, and he looks on the wall and he sees the article of myself in Black Belt Magazine. And he goes, what's this? And then I started explaining what Kumite fighting was. And I told him about my script, and I told him about different things. And he says, wow, that's far more interesting than doing some kind of kickboxer movie. This is really fascinating. I said, thank you. And he says, but with Sheldon here, we're going to rewrite your script. We're going to do it fresh. I want a fresh approach to it, because what you've done has been seen around town. And when my script originally was called Return of the Ninja. And the Return of the Ninja was because my instructor had won the event years earlier. They called him a ninja, per se. And here, his legacy is returning. That was the idea behind that title.
Makes sense.
But at the same time, around that same time, all of a sudden, I think it was 81, film came out, Enter the Ninja.
Yep. And
because Canon had to kind of use that, Return of the Ninja would have been like, people would mistake it for that film.
Right.
So I changed the title to Bloodsport. And I got the title Bloodsport from the fact that when I used to fight, we were treated like dogs, Mm-hmm. And dog fighting in England is called Bloodsport. That's what it's called. That's where I got the name from. So I nicknamed it Bloodsport. I called it Bloodsport. I used to make fun, make a Howard Cosell imitation, say, here we are at Bloodsport, where everyone's going to, every fighter gives a pint of blood. Are you willing to give some today? And then walk up to a guy, with a microphone. Are you willing to give some to the Red Cross here? And I just made fun of it. It was a way of breaking my fear, I guess.
Okay.
I was afraid, man. People say, I was afraid when I walked in that arena. I didn't know what I was going to expect. I saw people get seriously hurt when some people die in the ring. The reason it was called the death matches is because what happened in those days is they used to fight us so much that if a guy got a concussion, They would just tell you, suck it up, and you'd be back in class fighting, or you'd be back,
Wow.
competing the next week somewhere else.
Right.
And what happened is, especially in the Orient, these guys would fight so much that you'd see a guy just get one hit and it was over. He'd die right there in the ring in front of you.
That's crazy.
And it became quite common because they were fighting fighters too quickly. And that's where it got the nickname death matches.
Okay.
But it wasn't because they fought to the death per se.
Right.
Although there is some competitions that were like that. They used to fight in Hong Kong on the rooftops. And if the betting was large enough, the loser would be thrown off the roof. And the reason for that was everybody knew they weren't going to fix a fight because the loser loses big time. There's no recovery for him, no payout, no payday.
So with your background in like basically full contact, no rules fighting and everything, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the MMA and the UFC and kind of the impact that's had on martial arts over the past 25, 30 years?
I think Bloodsport inspired that entire generation. It wasn't for Bloodsport, you wouldn't have an MMA today. It became the model. Okay. That especially if you look at the very first UFCs.
Style versus style.
Right. But the MMA today really is no different than what judo was. It's really not something new. People think it's new, but when judo first debuted, it was made into a martial art. It had punching, it had throwing, it had everything in it that you see today. So it's just a natural progression, I believe. Human beings, we evolve, we constantly evolve. That's why my art, Bixru, is an evolving art. It's not a stagnant art. Shotokan Karate, stagnant art. It's based on its tradition. Some of the ninjutsu arts, Bujinkan, they pride themselves on doing things that's 4 centuries old and sticking to it. So, but a lot of the tenets of martial arts, I think, are lost, and that's what's really missing. The etiquette and the ethics, they're involved in martial arts. Today, you have 2 camps. You have a camp of real fighters or ethical human beings who train the old ways and honor almost like a code of chivalry. And then you have these others who are always looking outward. They're really the antithesis of martial arts, yet they're the biggest faces of martial arts. They're engaging in substance abuse. They are womanizers. They practice infidelities, pedophilia. They're basically deplorable human beings when you really stand back and take a look at them and how they treat people or how they live their lives. Yet they're the stars. They're made the icons. And that makes no sense to me.
Okay. So I'm assuming then you're not really a fan then either. So
no, I'm a fan of talent.
Okay.
I'm a fan of talent. I look at different people. Look at Mark Coleman. Mm-hmm. Okay. The guy was pound for pound, probably the best fighter of his time. But Mark, unfortunately, had a disease called alcoholism, and it took his career from him. But he's bounced back from that, stronger and a better man from it. It's his martial training and his discipline that grounded him to do that. And so no man is without fault. No man on this planet is without sin. None of us. So it's not for us to judge others and point this finger at them. It's for us to come from a place of compassion. But if you're going to have people be the leaders of an industry, they should have their shit together, if you know what I mean.
Right.
They need to be an example to children. That's what made baseball great. Baseball was great built on that idea. That's why the kids looked up to Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb. They idolized their baseball players in the 30s and 40s mm-hmm. because the way they were presented, they presented in a way of being of all the values that we cherish in American society. And those are somehow like lost now. They're not even being taught. A guy who's really well trained, who's accustomed to violence, he doesn't take his violence out on children and women. He will use that to protect them. It's the guy who's untrained, who can't control his rage. He's the one who will lash out and hurts the women and children. It's just the opposite of what you think it would be.
Who would you put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts? If you had to pick 2, 3, maybe 4 at the most martial artists that you'd put up there as whether they're just someone you personally know and have looked up to, or just like someone like a Bruce Lee who just had an impact on a generation. Who are a couple people you'd put on your Mount Rushmore?
That's a tough one.
Well, I used to ask for just one, but no one could ever give just one. So I figured I'd change it up a little bit and ask for at least a couple. If it doesn't have to be 4 like Mount Rushmore, but just a couple martial artists who you just put up on a pedestal and you think are whether they just had an impact on the martial arts world in general, or you personally, or something like that?
Well, look, Bruce Lee had a profound impact on me. Bruce Tegner had an effect on me. I can't really name it because I'm so eclectic in what I do,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to leave someone out.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you named two good ones already, and I'm sure, I would imagine Tanaka's probably up there too for you. So
I could put up there a 9-year-old kid who once taught me something.
well, there you go.
He was a Russian Jew, came over and he showed me a fighting trick that they used in Russia to survive. I'll never forget that. He was 9 years old. I go, shoot, that was pretty brilliant.
That's cool.
So I'm not trying to be evasive in your question.
No, I understand.
It's just, you know,
it's not an easy question. That's for sure. I'm going to try it out with a few guests and we'll see how it goes. I might end up taking it out in the future, but all right. How about this one then? In all your years of martial arts, is there a philosophy you've learned, that maybe one really important one that you keep coming back to, you still teach yourself and is very important in your everyday life?
Yeah. I mean, the philosophy is do unto others as you have them do unto you.
It's a good one.
You know, there's this commentary. It's real simple. And, but the main thing I think I try to teach people when they first, and I talked about this in another radio show, it would take us a couple hours to go over it, but is perspective. Always maintain your perspective, and be and know that other people have different perspectives than your own.
Okay. All right. So the last few are some kind of fun ones, and you can't pick something that you yourself have worked on or been involved in. So first one is favorite martial arts book. My favorite martial art book.
For me, it's a toss-up between Musashi's Go-Rin no Sho and Sun Tzu.
Nice.
Art of War.
Two good ones. Nice. Okay, cool. All right. Favorite martial arts TV show.
Favorite martial arts TV show. Oh, Kung Fu. When I was a kid growing up.
Okay. So I got to ask you, did you ever watch the early 90s sequel, The Legend Continues?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Most people, I think I'm the only one who actually watched that show. It's kind of funny. So, okay. And then favorite martial arts movie.
My favorite martial arts movie.
Yep. That you haven't been involved in.
That I'm not involved in.
Yes.
Because I would have to say Bloodsport. It's tough for me to pick my favorite martial arts movie, to be honest with you, because I was so influenced by so many.
Yes.
Billy Jack, I really loved.
Great movie.
I loved Billy Jack because of the message. Enter the Dragon, of course.
Nice.
And Blood on the Sun.
Nice. Three good ones. I got to watch that one. I wrote that one down. I'm definitely going to try to find that online later and watch it, because that sounds like a really good one. So, okay, cool. And then for the final question, this one, it doesn't have to be a martial arts movie per se, but is there a movie that you think has one of the best or your favorite martial arts fight scenes? Doesn't necessarily have to be.
Bloodsport, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you a couple of, I like the fight scenes in Atomic Blonde.
Ah, yes. Okay.
I thought that those, great choreography. The Bourne Identity.
Oh yeah, that's one of my goes.
Bourne Identity.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, the first Bourne film.
Yeah, with Matt Damon.
What's it called?
Yeah, that was the Bourne Identity. Yeah, that's some great fight scenes in that. Yes.
All right. Yeah. So I thought I liked that, and what is it? Atomic Blonde, Bourne Identity, Bloodsport. I was going to tell you about Bloodsport. Showtime did a special where they actually took the actual footage of actual kumite and they matched it up against my choreography. You can see it was all identical.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
That. Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of weird. I always thought it's weird. Like people say, oh, kumite doesn't exist yet. Here it was on Showtime. All the evidence was right there. It's like, where did that go? Nice. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. So do you think, I mean, obviously Hollywood changes things, obviously every movie, any true story, they change things. Do you think they'll ever do a movie about the kumite that's 100% realistic, that shows it how it really was? Hollywood not going to do something like that, probably.
The likelihood of them doing it is unlikely.
Yeah.
But anything's possible in this world. So
true.
People say we could never reach the moon, and we landed in the moon. Although those people will tell you we didn't.
That is true. Faked on a soundstage in Hollywood. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah. Well, I will definitely, I'll put links for whatever you want me to in our show notes. I'll put, links for your book, for your official website. Cause I know you do don't you have like online training and stuff you offer and everything too? I'm really retired, but go to Frank. Yeah. If you could put the link, Frank Dukes Bloodsport.com. Oh, okay. I will do that. Let me write that one
That's
down.
the link. Yeah. www.frankdukesbloodsport.com.
Okay, cool. I will put a link to that one also. And like I said, before this airs, it'll be about a month before it airs. So anything else that comes up before then you want me to put a link to or anything like that, I will gladly put it out there. But I appreciate your time, and I enjoyed hearing the story. It's been great, chatting with you. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.